Hey fans, how's it going? Bored now. Rachel McDonald back with you this week. I've got my David Lynch shirt on, which some of you might be able to see, some might not, and
Very
that's
nice.
because we are, of course, talking about one of Lynch's classics this week. We are talking about Mulholland Drive, a really bizarre, really entertaining movie. Yeah, I've got mine over there somewhere, but which is a big favourite of mine and Rachel's. And the reason we're talking about this is, believe it or not, it's 20 years old this year. I mean, hard to imagine it's been
Crazy.
that long. And we both have our own memories of experiencing it for the first time. And I think, just as Lynch fans, really, this is one of his staples for us. It's one of the most bizarre and intriguing, really thought-provoking mysteries of our era and sort of classic Lynch. I think it's a film which really embodies a lot of the classic Lynch trademarks, like part of like an unofficial trilogy with Lost Highway and also with Inland Empire later on. Like they just see it as a
Okay.
bit of like a Hollywood style trilogy,
Mm.
because obviously Inland Empire is definitely, set around Hollywood, and I think like Lost Highway is like based in Hollywood, even though it's obviously not as much about acting and what have you. And
Yeah.
so, but I mean, they're sort of broken up by the straight story, but I mean, it is sort of seen as like probably like an unofficial trilogy. It might be people just theorizing. Started life as like the Audrey spin-off, Audrey from Twin
Yes,
Peaks.
I did know that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
remember reading
quite
that
a
Sherilyn Fenn
well-known.
was talking about Lynch doing this as a show for her. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just one of those funny like things where you can sort of look at how we've come since here, like the time that's elapsed. And because obviously when Mulholland Drive was a film, when Mulholland Drive came out, really film was very much still the master of TV at that point.
Mm.
I mean, I think there'd been a certain change in TV and it was gathering momentum, but certainly probably in 2001, film was seen still very much as the dominant sort of,
Yes.
medium of TV. And I think one thing I always feel is it's sort of funny because Lynch wanted an Audrey spin-off, which obviously Mulholland Drive was originally going to be, and it wouldn't sort of get funded, and that's why he made Mulholland Drive. And obviously it changed because in the end it wasn't an Audrey spin-off, but
Mm.
sort of I think at least the idea for Mulholland Drive was what that spin-off would have been. But it's sort of funny just looking back now, where at the time he couldn't get it made for TV, but he could get it made for film. And it's almost like today the opposite might be true, where all the creative ideas and people like Lynch, if they kind of don't want any politics and they just want to make their own thing, more likely go to TV now than he would film.
Yeah,
So
because
it's
you can be
almost
more
like it's been
experimental on
a
TV
complete,
now. Yeah.
yeah, in many ways. So it's just funny how things change over time, and that's
Mm.
something. Another thing is this was kind of, well, it was Naomi Watts's big break, really. I mean,
Yes.
this was a game changer for her because she'd actually been acting for over a decade at this point.
Yes.
Sort of late 80s was her sort of early start, and Mulholland Drive didn't work out for her if it wasn't a success. And it, because there's no denying it would have springboarded her onto like other big roles and stuff, because it was in the next few years after Mulholland Drive where
Yeah.
she was getting regular work and quite meaty sort of roles. So definitely the intention that Mulholland Drive brought her was a big turning point. So, and I think there's something almost unintentionally meta about that when you see the story of Mulholland Drive. It's almost like the
Definitely.
story of Naomi Watts in some ways.
Yes.
And another tidbit I heard is that it was actually Nicole Kidman who talked her into not quitting acting.
Yes, it was, because they're
And
good friends. Mm.
yeah, so that's a great story right there.
Yeah.
And just and obviously it sort of panned out, and she got a lot of acclaim for Mulholland Drive. So yeah, before we start talking about the setup and the plot, do you want to share some memories of when you first saw it or how you experienced it?
I first saw Mulholland Drive. I was 17. It was for a school assignment for my film studies class. And we were having to do an assignment where we had to pick a director and talk about their body of work. And ironically, I actually wanted to do Baz Luhrmann. And then one of the other kids swooped in and got Baz Luhrmann before I did. So I was like, okay, I actually really wanted to see Mulholland Drive. So I was like, I'll do David Lynch, because I think at that point I'd seen the pilot for Twin Peaks and I'd seen Blue Velvet, which, so I rented Mulholland Drive to work on my assignment. And I remember sitting down and watching this film. And at the end of the film, just sitting there for like 5 minutes, just going, what did I just watch? And it was just like this insane feeling of like, I have no idea what I've just witnessed, but I know I've just witnessed something spectacular. And I was saying to Stephen just last night after we watched the film, when I first, so I've always loved movies and TV shows, but I was never allowed to watch that much media growing up because my mother she was very anti-screen time. So I didn't get to see a lot of movies growing up. And a lot of my movie watching was done when I was a teenager and in my early 20s. So until I was about 16, 17, I'd never really seen any really experimental movies. I'd only really seen mainstream movies that were released in the cinema that you could get on home video. So Mulholland Drive was the first movie where I really realized the power of movie making and how you could and how movies didn't have to be just a linear storytelling, how they could explore different themes, how they could explore different personalities and different obstacles. And this was the first movie that made me really kind of start to fall in love with filmmaking and what filmmaking could do and how you could reach the audience through film, because it was such a unique film. It was such a different film. It was different to anything I'd ever seen before at that point in time. Obviously, cinema has gotten a lot more experimental since that came out, but this movie was a really big shock to me, and it left such an impact on me. I don't know about you, but I have there are several movies in my life that have just made such a big impact on me that they've just become really personal movies to me because of the impact and the impression that they left on me. And this was one of them. This was one of the first movies that I remember just stuck with me for like days afterwards. I was still thinking about this movie and all the images were still stuck in my head. Like even just having watched it last night, I woke up this morning just still kind of like thinking about it and thinking about everything in it. And it's one of those movies that you can't really rewatch a lot. It doesn't have, because it's so intense, but every time you rewatch it, you discover something new, or you discover a new facet, or you discover something that you missed the first time around. It's such a complex and thrilling and intense movie. I think the acting's really good. I think, like you said, because this was Naomi Watts' breakthrough role, like you can definitely see why this role, because she's so good in the movie. And when we get into the plot and we can talk more about exactly how good she is and how the characters that she has to play. So for me, this movie is a very personal movie. It's a very big movie. And like I said, it was one of the first movies that really started to open my eyes about what can be done through film as a medium for like communication to the audience and getting themes and deeper meanings across. So that was my first watch of Moulin Rouge. What about you? Moulin Rouge? Why did I say Moulin Rouge?
Freudian slip.
Oh,
maybe because of the Baz Luhrmann thing.
Because of the Baz Luhrmann thing. Mulholland Drive. Let's get back on track. Okay.
Both begin with M, but yeah. Well, that's sort of perfect, and I think that works actually for the sort of film it is. What you were saying, because I think in some ways, and this is something Lynch does a lot, which is why I like. Well, one of the reasons I like him so much is I think because he is in love with film and the art film, and although obviously a lot of his films are heavy going and they can be quite depressing, I think also there is this beauty to them where he is celebrating the art of cinema, the art of sort of performance. You know, there's certain scenes in this movie, although this movie in many ways, obviously, it gets into the the dirty side of Hollywood and filmmaking, and a lot of the politics, and I mean, I think it's a very meta movie, and I think in some ways it's Lynch expressing his frustration with Hollywood. I mean, we can get into it, but I think in a way the Justin Theroux character is a young Lynch sort of thing. I think that's deliberate. Then it's almost like, Lynch is speaking through him. But at the same time, I do think there is a fondness for Hollywood and filmmaking, and particularly like an old-fashioned traditional side of Hollywood. So I think although this film obviously is intense in places and there's a lot of cynicism, I think also there's a lot of love and a lot of celebration about certain things that Lynch loves about Hollywood, and the mystery of it, the beauty, the power of it, that sort of thing. I mean, I think he has a love for like just things like a photo resume, that sort of thing as well. I think he sort of said that. It is quite similar. I think at the time I was first getting into Lynch and his work, and I think I just have memories of just wanting to see it for a long time. And it was, well, first time was actually on video. I had to rent it because it was one of those things where it just, even though there was quite a big multiplex cinema near me at the time, they didn't show it, which really annoyed me, because you've got like 12 screens, and you know, it was a reasonable size release, even though it's obviously not like a mainstream type film, but it was, you know, quite accessible in a lot of cinemas. So I was really annoyed they didn't show it on like one of 12 screens. And
fair enough.
so I did sort of have to wait for it, and I think because it was quite early on in my Lynch experience of getting to know his work and love, because I hadn't seen much of his work, I don't think, before I saw this. So, and I just remember the reviews coming out and people talking about it, and it was such a hot topic, you know, with film critics and different views, because obviously that's something about Lynch probably that we love really, then he does divide people so much, and very much like Marmite, and I think that was people's reactions to this film, where they came away either loving it or sort of hating it in a way, you know. And that's the thing. I think that's part of what makes Lynch unique. Because like, I don't think many people would like go out and say, okay, Lynch has no talent, he sucks, or whatever. I think it's just a taste thing. It's like in some ways they can see this is a talented guy and there's something to this, but it's just not for me. And that's very much the thing. But I just remember hearing the reviews and people raving about it and talking about it so much, and then finally seeing it, and then probably it took me a few watches and I really started to get into it, and it was quite a few years later I saw it on the big screen for the first time, I think, when they just brought it back out. But I've watched it a fair amount actually, but I think maybe like you, it's grown as my love for Lynch has grown, and I think it's one of his staples. I think it's one of his best films. I think it's right up there, and it's personally one of my favorite films ever.
Me too. It's in my top 10. Like, if I listed my top 10 movies, it would be in top 10. It's so haunting and leaves such an impact. So I definitely agree with you there.
Yeah, very unique, strangeness of Lynch and the beauty and how cryptic it is, but at the same time, he at least does throw you sort of breadcrumbs, and I mean, we were talking off air and saying it's actually quite a funny film, and there are places where you do laugh out loud in them. So I think stuff like that maybe make it a bit more accessible than some of his films. Although I agree with you, then it wouldn't be the first film I sort of shown, like Lynch film, I would show to people. But it's sort of, but, and I think part of it might also be because we've seen it now quite a lot. So I think sometimes you watch a film and there's just, it's just your film in a way. It's like a personal thing, and so in some ways you might be laughing and other people wouldn't, or you just like I was watching it the other week and I was just shouting out some of the lines as they were going, because you just have it now where you sort of know it really well, and you just have that enjoyment sort of thing. It feels quite personal to you. So yeah, a lot to talk about. So I think we're about ready to get into it. I'll just set up the plot as much as I can, because that's tricky
as much
in
as
itself.
you can.
Yeah, because there's more than one plot really. There's sort of at least two main plots going on simultaneously, and then they sort of slowly converge. Technically, well, there's sort of at least a third. You've got the plot in Winkies as well, which we'll sort of get to. But yeah, we will do. That's interesting stuff. But the two main plots, at least. So you've got I'm going to call her Mystery Woman for the purpose of this, because it's sort of unclear what her real name is, and that changes over the film anyway. But Mystery Woman, who has various names throughout the film, but at the start of the film, she's being driven in a limo down Mulholland Drive of the title, and they stop, and it says, "Well, what's this? Well, we don't stop here." And I think he points a gun, or does he just tell her to get out?
No, he does. He points the gun at her.
Tells her to get out. She gets out, and you get this whole thing with her where she's suddenly like really confused, and it appears as though she has some sort of amnesia, and
there's a car crash.
Yeah, sorry, there's a car crash.
Yeah, so before she gets out, just as they point the gun at her, screaming teenagers come around, and there's a car crash. And we need to mention that because that will become significant later on. So there's a car crash, and then she gets out, like he was saying, all disoriented, and starts stumbling down the street. And I'll let you go from here.
So she goes to this apartment on Mulholland Drive, and she starts resting there. And then at the same time, you've got Naomi Watts' character, who again has more than one name during the film, but she starts off at least as Betty. And she arrives in Hollywood on a plane. Everything's all glamorous and dreamlike and sort of surreal, and this is just so perfect. She arrives with a nice old couple who seem very welcoming, but there might be something a bit more sinister about them. And she arrives with this dream, and that's crucial to where we're going in this film. But this wide-eyed, open, enthusiastic Hollywood dream. She goes to her Aunt Ruth's apartment to stay, because her Aunt Ruth, knows people in the industry, has an apartment, and she has a big audition the next day. She goes to stay, finds Rita there, and that's sort of your first plot, really, like the unfolding thing with them, where I said Rita by mistake, but that's a name she gives herself later on. And so you get the relationship and story with these two girls. One of them appears to not know who she is, so she's trying to figure that out. So that's one of the mysteries of the film. And then Betty obviously is an inspiring actress, so you've got that plot going on. And then you've got the plot, which I hinted at earlier, Adam, played by Justin Theroux, who is, a young up-and-coming director who's in the process of directing, well, possibly his first film, but certainly an early film in his career. And we get all sorts of politics with that, where they're trying to force an actress on him, basically. So casting the lead actress, and there's sort of forces at work against him, trying to strong arm him into casting a particular actress. And slowly those plots sort of converge, and different things happening around Hollywood. So we've got a big mystery, a big sort of riddle in a way at the heart of it. A lot of surreal things, a lot of oddball, classic Lynch oddball type characters. So Yeah, I think we've probably made it clear that we like it a lot, but if you want to start talking about it, and I mean, I guess we can sort of, I don't know if you want to talk about theories or if you want to talk about the opening scene, just how
Yeah,
things are
well,
set up.
we will at some point have to get into spoilers, but we'll leave that just for now. So, as Keith said, we've got this basic premise of you have this mystery with these two women, one who has amnesia, names herself Rita, because she sees a picture of Rita Hayworth up on the thing. It's a nice little old Hollywood shout out. I kind of like that. There's a very 50s vibe to this movie, which I'll discuss again a little bit later, because that's again part of the theories. But before we get into anything big, deep theories, because that's going to take up a big thing, I just wanted to talk about the technical aspects of this film, because Lynch as a filmmaker is so unique. And I really love the direction of this film and the way it's shot, the sound in particular. I noticed with this film, a lot of the sound editing is really interesting. But I mean, the opening scene alone, Lynch likes strong opening scenes. You know, he has a penchant for these scenes that have these really big impacts right off the bat. And so almost from the very first scene, you are thrown into a mystery. We're not told anything about this woman. We don't know where she's going. I mean, Mulholland Drive, that's pretty much it. That's all we're told. We don't know why this guy's pointing a gun at her, and then of course she loses her memory. But even that opening scene is just filmed so well. Like, you really feel the atmosphere, the use of shadows on her face going in between light and dark, which again could suggest a duality, which becomes a very big theme in this movie. There's a lot of stuff about duality and different sides to people, and good versus evil, doppelgangers. There's a lot of that kind of stuff that will come up. But I think that overall, like, Lynch, some of the shots he uses, the depth perception. There's this one shot when we got the Hollywood thing of you've got the guy who's kind of sitting in a red room behind glass, and he's kind of shot from very far away to show that he's a little bit otherworldly. Of course, this being Lynch, there's lots of use of red and blue. He loves those two colors. Lots of symbolism there, but what the colors mean can change depending on the scene, depending on the characters that we're with. There is a running theme of a blue key and a blue box, which will become very significant again once we get into spoilers. And the score of this movie, oh my goodness, the score is beautiful. It's this. I actually didn't look up who does the score for this movie. I should have looked into
that. Badamateli.
Okay, well, whoever it is,
regular composer,
he's a regular. Yeah. It's just got that kind of. I don't know what it is about the way he composes this music, but it always feels very unsettling, even in scenes that are supposed to be a bit nicer, a bit more easygoing. Like even just the opening scene. So the opening credits are a 50s jitterbug contest with this big brassy kind of 50s
swing style music.
But it feels very over the top and very artificial and very, put on. Like, look, everyone's happy and dancing. And again, that kind of follows the themes into the movies of this beautiful facade that hides the ugliness behind it. And I think that Lynch sets that up so perfectly from the beginning. And so many sequences are just done so well. The Club Silencio scene, the scene where they go to Diane Selwyn's apartment, who, guys, we will explain who everyone is as we go along. All of the scenes with Justin Theroux. Even, I love the scene where he's driving up the corral to go and meet the cowboy, and the car keeps going in and out of focus. Again,
classic
we're going,
scene.
In between light and dark. Scene. The Winky scene is one of the best scenes in the movie, and the ominous fear and the voyeurism in that scene, just everything about this film and the way that Lynch chooses all the camera angles and the lighting and the shadows. It's beautiful. I mean, even if you get completely lost by the plot, which no one's blaming you for because everyone gets lost by the plot of this movie, just appreciating it from a visual standpoint is amazing. Even the two lead actresses, the way that because I heard that Lynch apparently picked them based on their photos. So he obviously was going for
that's really
a
cool
look. You have Betty, who's blonde, fresh-faced, innocent, and Rita, who has amnesia, is dark, dark eyes, dark hair, and you have those two, again, the light and the dark, and it kind of is a beautiful parallel and a symbolism that kind of goes through the whole movie. So on a technical level, this movie is brilliant. What about you? What do you think of the direction and everything of this movie? I think it's one of Lynch's best. It's so
I
good.
think I would agree, and I think you've summed it up really well. But I think there's so much so much detail in every scene, and so many layers upon layers within a shot. And I think, yeah, just how deliberate everything is in any Lynch film or TV or whatever you want to say. I mean, maybe this goes to an extra level of that just because I think it's a very meta film on Hollywood, and I think it's almost commenting on the nature of performance. And yeah, I think he's having a lot of fun playing with these ideas and these tropes. You're not actually sure what era this is. It feels weirdly out of time. Like, I think because it's a 2001 film, and because there's not a lot to suggest that it's not a modern setting, I think you assume it's in modern times. But then because there's so many details that are like they're a pastiche of something from the 50s or 40s, 60s, whatever you want to say, so many like stylistic type choices that sort of you would say, yeah, that's definitely an older sort of thing, an older sort of look. Like, obviously, the way you have these singers who are like rehearsing for this role, they're definitely singing a 50s style song, and they've got the whole design of that. And so I think that happens a lot with Lynch. I would say Blue Velvet, a similar sort of thing. Like, that sort of small town in Blue Velvet, it does feel right out of the 40s. And there's certain things in that movie that makes it feel like a 40s setting. But then there's other stuff that you think, well, it's sort of obviously it was made in the 80s and similar to the town in Twin Peaks. So I think it happens a lot with Lynch where he maybe doesn't want to say this is one time period or the other. I think he just likes it being a whole unique Lynchian sort of world, which it's not tied to any sort of time period. And
like Lynch universe. Yes, time doesn't exist here.
Yeah, and maybe you can see that in other like stuff, like maybe in a funny, like obviously in a much lighter sort of thing, but something like Stars Hollow in Gilmore Girls, you could almost say that's like their version of like a Twin Peaks style town.
Yeah,
because it's almost in that where they sort of live by their sort of own rules, and they they are like off the beatnik and what have you. But no, I think that's definitely something Lynch does though, and the level of detail, the music is great. Yeah, I mean, Baden Mattelli does a bit that I'll mention to you, but he actually has a cameo in this film. Did you know that?
Oh no, where? Who is he?
He is the other guy in the scene, the one who spits out the coffee when you have those. Obviously very meta again, because he deliberately cast his own composer in a scene, and anyone who knows anything about Lynch knows that he's obsessed with coffee. So there's something meta, I think, about
he does love coffee, doesn't he?
He spits out the coffee, and again, there's certain, I think, comments on superficial Hollywood a bit, the fact that these characters are very fussy about, it's espresso, isn't it? But they're fussy about
espresso,
having the perfect espresso. But yeah, I think there's something meta about him actually casting his own composer. It's almost like he's putting in this sort of guy. And this, I mean, we'll talk about the theatre scene later, but there's actually another example in that scene, I think, where you have Rebecca Del Rio shows up, who's a real life singer who works with Lynch a lot. But it's a masterpiece, and I think it's a good sign of a film where you get more out of it on each viewing. And
definitely.
I mean, it was a while ago. I probably and I'd sort of heard other people say it, but then I decided on the answer to the riddle in the middle. But even after that, there's still so much to fit together. And it's a great film because it's challenging and it's got layers, but there's also beauty to it. There's a lot in there if you're just a fan of classic movies. You've got great performances, great layered performances. I love also one of the central, but the relationship between the two women.
Yes.
And that's something Lynch maybe doesn't get enough credit for, is he actually does push progressive, strong female leads in his work. And there's obviously the fact that we'll talk about it, but you have a sexual relationship between them later on, and obviously that's interesting when you see the turn that it takes later, but it sort of is something that he actually puts like a lesbian style scene in his sort of movie. And I think over his career, I mean, obviously there's a mixture of characters, but I think he definitely is known for giving women really strong, quite progressive roles. So I think that's something we see in Mulholland Drive. And obviously there's something quite nice about the fact that he has continued to work with Naomi Watts since then, because she appeared in the Twin Peaks, The Return.
I heard that she was in the revival, the Twin Peaks revival.
Yeah, she is. She's really good. She's got a good role in it. And obviously the Weird Inland Empire, she's a rabbit in that. She's under the hood as one of the rabbits. So in that sitcom scene with the Weird Rabbit sitcom. But yeah, so it's one of those things. I think once you work with Lynch, a lot of the actors tend to have a good rapport with him, so they continue to reuse him. Obviously the guy who played the man from the other place in Twin Peaks is in this, and the bug thing. It's sort of, it does look very sort of artificial, and because they're almost in like silhouettes as well, so it's almost like they're not physically there. And I do love the contrasting colours and how we then go to a more sort of brooding, more ominous sort of like, just it's like Mulholland Drive, a sort of area everyone knows, but he makes it so haunting and sort of terrifying. And the music are almost like the lights of the limo, down that long sort of way, makes it very sort of eerie. And just the mystery of it, the fact that he's saying there's this mystery on Mulholland Drive sort of thing. And there's a lot of fun like cameos. I really enjoyed Robert Foster's cameo, his scene when they're like the two cops after the crash, and just the deadpan humor is like because one of them's like, because one of them's really goofy, isn't he? And naive. It sort of says, it could be, unrelated. And he's like, well, any of those kids wearing pearl earrings? He's like, no, could be someone missing, maybe. And you got this achieve. And and it's a small scene, but obviously Robert Foster, who we lost recently, but really good actor. And he just nails it in a very sort of brief scene.
My favorite cameo has to be Billy Ray Cyrus. So the director we were talking about, Adam Kessler, he's not having a good day. There's this one scene where he comes home to find his wife in bed with Billy Ray Cyrus, which is just not the guy you want to find your wife in bed with ever. And he has this brilliant. So Kessler comes home, sees his wife in bed with this dude. The wife gets pissed off at him, which I absolutely love. I love that he walks in and the wife's just like, "Now you've done it. Why are you even home?" Oh no, we lost him. And Kessler storms out, and Billy Ray Cyrus just has this great deadpan line where the wife is ranting and going on about the coming home, and he's just like, he's probably upset, Lorraine. And it's
so deadpan,
just so deadpan, and such a random. I mean, when I first watched this, I didn't really know who Billy Ray Cyrus was, and I think it was like several years later I watched it, and I was like, oh, dude, Billy Ray Cyrus is in this. How did I not know that? Like, so random cameo.
I wouldn't have known what he looked like. I obviously knew of him, and I remember, his big song, "Achy Breaky Heart." That's it. But now obviously lots of people probably know what he looks like because of who his daughter is. But Yeah, it's great. It's just so random casting someone like him in that role, and that's a really entertaining scene. I mean, some of the stuff with Adam does become quite like farcical and entertaining because some of the like just whacking the limo windows with the golf clubs after he's come out of that meeting, which was really funny. But and then obviously, yeah, just what he does, like because when he sees her in bed with this, because does he clean pools? Something like that?
Yeah, he's a pool cleaner. So he comes home and he sees the pool cleaner truck out the front. Then he walks in and he looks over at the pool and there's no one at the pool. And he's just like, huh, okay.
Yeah.
And then he just, he
what's going on here?
Finds his wife in bed and he doesn't even say anything. He just kind of stands there. And then he turns around and just walks back out. And you're like, what's going on?
Yeah, it goes for the jewelry. So it's this weird sort of way to like just get back at her, where he starts putting paint in her jewelry box to mess her. And I quite like her and the actress actually, the way she reacts to it. It's like he's taken my jewelry, you bastard. And that's when he's there. Was probably upset Lorraine, and he's just talking in this calm type voice all the time, and then eventually it's like she's like, "Get him, Gene, get him," and it's like that's no way to treat your wife. I don't care what she's done, and then they start. She told you to leave. Here's the door, and they get into a big fight. And I love how feisty she is, like jumping on him. I mean, there's a scene later when she jumps
later
on
where she jumps on one of the big guys. But again, I love how Adam, he just kind of like, he gets hit in the face, everything, he just kind of stands up and he just walks back out. Like the whole scene, Justin Theroux is so good in this scene. He just deadpans the whole scene. He walks in, he sees his wife, he walks out, he gets the jewelry, he gets punched in the face, he walks back out. It's like, it's almost like, because of all the shit that he's gone through earlier in the day with the executives trying to force the movie, he's at the point, he's just like, I don't even care anymore. This is just what's happening. And then he just walks back out. So again, it's kind of that absurdist, surrealist humor that like Lynch kind of inserts into his movies and his TV shows at times that you wouldn't even expect. All of a sudden you just get like this really funny, like thing happen. And then you go back to like the serious stuff. And he does it in such a way that it doesn't feel like out of place. It just goes with the whole surrealist kind of feel of the movie. Everything is heightened, everything is over the top. So I really like that. There's another great funny scene with, as you mentioned when we were talking off screen, the worst hitman in history.
Jacob
so we have
out of Lost.
Yes. And he's so he's having a chat with some other guy, and there's some vague reference to a car crash, so we get the feeling that this is somehow connected to Rita. But then he goes and he shoots this guy, right? That all goes fine. But then he goes to put the gun in the guy's hand, and it accidentally fires and goes through the wall into some lady next door. And he has to go over and she's all like, something bit me. It's like,
there's a bad taste gag in there, which shouldn't be funny, but it kind of is.
It kind of works.
She thinks she's been attacked by some sort of...
She's a very large woman. So yes, the implication is that the bullet hasn't gone too far. But Mr. Hitman then has to go and subdue her, and she's not going down without a fight. Like, she really gives it to him. So now we have this hitman and this lady wrestling on the floor, and he's trying to drag her out.
You've got the weird guy with the Hoover who shows up. So I think the absurdity of the scene and what makes it so funny is then the more he tries to do to like sort the situation out and clean up, he actually makes it worse for himself, and he has to like go to extremes, and he sets the fire alarm off at one point, which is
because
just
he shoots the vacuum cleaner and the vacuum cleaner explodes. Like, who hired you, man? How did you even get
worst hitman ever. And it's like, it just feels like this wacky sort of B movie type scene, and that Lynch is just sort of having fun with it. And I think the bad taste joke, but he does sometimes go for things like that. But I mean, in the scene, it just works. It
does work.
But, but
they seem random, but when you watch the movie as a whole, everything kind of does end up coming to, well, not completely, because it's Lynch. It's like trying to fill in Swiss cheese. You know, there's always going to be holes, no matter what you try. But there are things that you can kind of line up that then kind of make a bit more sense. So I think at this point in time, we're going to segue into discussing the film in depth, which means we're going to have to reveal a very big spoiler. So for anyone who hasn't seen the film and wants to, maybe stop here. But for those of us who have, let's continue on this weird and wonderful journey. So as Keith mentioned, we originally have these two storylines that are a little bit weird, but seem fairly straightforward. So you have Rita and Betty. So Rita's the one with amnesia. Betty is Naomi Watts. And they're trying to figure out what happened to Rita. They end up finding out a name, Diane Selwyn. Rita thinks that it might be her name, might be someone from her past. So they go to investigate who this Diane Selwyn is. They find her apartment and they walk in, and in one of the most tense and horrifying scenes, they find a dead body in the apartment. Rita rushes out, decides that she needs to change her appearance, and they end up getting her a blonde wig to try and hide because now she's convinced that someone is after her. They go back to the apartment. They have a scene where they essentially have sex and they fall in love with each other. It's kind of simultaneously very pornographic, but also very romantic. I don't know how Lynch managed to do that, but it is. It's a very romantic scene, but it is also a very pornographic scene.
I mean, I think that's partly because Lynch likes to nod to like kind of B-style movies and be a bit, exploitation. But at the same time, you're definitely right. In a way, he saves it from being pervy because it is sort of so romantic, and it's obviously you followed these two women, so it's a very beautiful relationship.
And you've seen them get close to each other, and it is a very tender scene, but it is very. I mean, there's a lot of nudity. It does feel a bit gratuitous at times. They fall asleep together, and then Rita starts talking in her sleep, saying silencio and talking in Italian or Spanish, something. And she asks Betty to go to a club with her. They go to this club, Club Silencio. We're going to talk about this scene more. And at the club, they discover a blue box in Betty's bag. Now, previously, I spoke about Rita has a blue key. They go back home. They put the key in the box, and this is where the whole movie gets turned on its head. So you think that you're watching this nice little movie about these two women solving a mystery and a director whose film is being sabotaged. All of a sudden, we're taken to a different reality. All of a sudden, we see the character that we thought of as Betty wake up on a bed, and this character is now suddenly Diane Selwyn. And suddenly, Rita is a character called Camilla. Adam is still there, the director, but now we see that Rita and Betty were working on a movie with Adam. There's some bad blood between these two characters. Not Rita and Betty, sorry. We are Diane and Camilla now. So we basically spend the last third of the movie in a different reality where Camilla and Diane had some sort of affair, but it looks like Camilla left her for Adam Kessler. And then we actually see a reverse of the opening scene where we see Diane in a limousine going to Mulholland Drive. And it's the exact same sort of setup as the opening scene. She's driven down a dark road, the lights are flickering, and then the guy turns around, but he doesn't have a gun this time. Instead, he says, "We're here." And Camilla leads Diana up to a party at Adam's house where poor Diane is completely humiliated. She finds out that Adam and Camilla are getting married. She is forced to talk about what a failure she's been in Hollywood. She's forced to talk about like how she knew Camilla, how she met her. And then we get like all these series of events where we see her meet with the incompetent hitman. And he says he gives her a blue key and says the job will be done when you get this. And it all culminates towards this ending where eventually we see Diane kind of go crazy as she's haunted by the creepy old people from the beginning, and they come from the start, and they come after her as she screams and screams and screams, and then shoots herself in the head, and the movie ends. And you just sit there thinking, what just happened? So now we're going to get into all of the themes concerning doppelgangers and dual lives and dreams and everything. So when you first saw this film, what did you think had happened? Did you have any theories, or did you just sit there going, what the hell?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, no, there's no way I figured that out on the first viewing, and it's over time as you hear certain things and you work certain things out. And I think what's really like great about it in a way is then you do have, I think, pretty much every character pop up in both versions, both dimensions, or however you want to say it. I mean, basically, they change roles. They change Betty, who is the more confident of the two for pretty much all that first half of the film. And it's the opposite, obviously. Mystery
Diane.
Woman slash Rita. Well,
Rita slash Camilla.
Rita, yeah. She doesn't know who she is. She's lost her identity. She's very nervous. And when they flip later on, it's completely different. She's the confident one. She's having the sort of brilliant Hollywood career, and it's Betty. Diane, sorry, as the Watts character is called in that version, who's down on her luck. She's obviously heartbroken over being left by Camilla, and she's it's sort of that classic Hollywood thing of being almost spit out sort of thing by Hollywood, and just sort of down on her luck, but yeah, it's sort of interesting how pretty much every character, at least the main characters, are in each sort of thing, each version, but their fortunes are different in that version, or you see them do something different. I mean, because one thing I noticed is in that scene where Adam and Camilla announce their engagement, he actually mentions the pool guy because he's talking about his ex-wife. It's she I got the pool, she got the pool,
and she got the pool guy. Yeah.
So that's quite clever, going back to that. So it's almost like, there is some version of what happened in the previous thing which is consistent with this version, maybe, but it's almost like, just the change means they were put on different paths. So suddenly things are, because obviously in that version, really things are working out a lot more rosy for Adam than they are in the original.
So the main theory, the main, so when I first saw this film, I had no idea what was going on. Like I sat there for 5 minutes afterwards just going, what did I just watch? And as I said, I did this as an assignment for school. So I was trying to figure out the deeper meaning. And it was only after I gave the presentation that someone, one of the other students was like, did you ever consider that the first half of the movie is a dream? Now, that is the most popular interpretation of the movie, that in the second half of the movie, that's the reality, that Camilla dumped Diane, and as revenge, Diane put a hit out on her, and that's why we see her with the hitman, and that her guilt has driven her to create or have a dream where everything is different. So that's the main theory, that Diane killed Camilla, had this dream where everything's different, and then killed herself. But Lynch himself has said that interpretation is too simple, like to look deeper than just that interpretation. So you could see it as your dream, or you could see it as an alternate reality. You could just see it as Diane imagining things differently. Have you read or have you seen David Lynch's 10 Clues to Unlocking Mulholland Drive?
Yeah, I've got them on the DVD.
So
I mean, you can go through them, but
I had them open while I was watching the film, trying to So if we want to go into them, or if you wanted to add anything before I go into them, but I think they're really interesting, these clues, and don't really tell you anything because it's Lynch.
Is if you just go through the clues, and then if I've got any ideas around them, I'll say. Basically.
All right, so the first one is pay particular attention to the beginning of the film. At least 2 clues are revealed before the credits. So that's the jitterbug contest that Betty wins. And apparently there are 2 clues there, which is interesting. I'm wondering if one of the clues is to indicate that the Diane reality is real, because she does mention winning a jitterbug contest. So we're maybe seeing her memory. It's also interesting to note that in that scene, there is a superimposed picture of Diane with the 2 creepy old people. So a lot of people have theorized that these are actually her relatives. possibly her grandparents. And there is a prevalent theory that Diane has experienced some sort of sexual abuse in her past, which is a bit of a theme in Lynch films. You know, you have it in Fire Walk with Me, and you have it in Blue Velvet. So there is the theory that this was her in happier days, or just remembering her grandparents as better people than they actually were, that maybe the family covered up the abuse. It's just a theory. So
it's I mean, it's possible. I could see that, because obviously I wondered why they appeared in that scene, like, and that maybe she suppressed that, like that's part of the film in a way. Okay.
And that would explain why they are so menacing later on in the film, and why they emerge when she's at her darkest time, because she could be being triggered. So that's the first clue. The second one is notice appearances of the red lampshade, which I swear I think I only saw in one scene, which is the scene where Diane picks up the phone and Rita's like, we're going to the party. Like, I don't remember the red lampshade anywhere else in the movie. I might not be watching for it.
Yeah, you're probably right. I was trying to remember if there was like a lampshade of some sort. You know, the scene quite early on when they're phoning about, and you've got like the guy in the room, and they're just saying the girl is still missing. I didn't know if there was a lampshade in one of those scenes.
Oh yeah,
there's a light of some sort. It might not be a lampshade, but also, I mean, not that it might be important to this, but isn't one of the items that I mean, this is confusing, but the Diane character, when she's staying in that other girl's apartment, isn't one of the items a lampshade because she wants her stuff back?
Yes, she does want her stuff back. It is, but I'm not sure if it's red. So they're saying here, in Diane's dream, the red lampshade appears at the end of the phone call chain in the middle of Hollywood's Byzantine conspiracy. The phone is not being answered. I think the lampshade is shown when Betty and Rita, so the original personalities, when they call Diane Selwyn, I think you see a red lampshade on the next to the phone. But again, this was one that I didn't really pay much attention to. So that's clue number 2. So clue number 3 is, can you hear the title of the film that Adam Kesher is auditioning actresses for? Is it mentioned again? It's mentioned twice. So it's called The Sylvia North Story. So they mention it when he's auditioning actresses, and then they mention it at the end in the reality, and Diane says that she and Camilla met on A Sylvia North Story, and Camilla got the main role and Diane got a smaller role. So I don't know, again, if this is supposed to be indicating Diane's dream and the matchup between it and reality, or because it is interesting that if it is Diane's dream, that she could be trying to justify Camilla getting the role over her by, in her dream, Adam is being forced to put the actress in as opposed to actually audition people with talent. It could also be a reference to the fact that Camilla slept her way into the role. And again, that adds kind of to Diane's jealousy of Adam and Camilla. But again, so I think, see, it's just all kind of like, you don't quite know what to make of these clues.
Yeah, because again, if you're using dream type logic, which obviously Lynch does a lot with his films as well, which is why I think obviously in a way film is the perfect medium for him, because so much of what film is escaping into another world, escaping into a dream, and it sort of does have its own like logic. So yeah, if you're using dream logic and applying it to this is Diane's dream and different things, then of course, in some ways, if you're coming up with a dream, I mean, who knows what a dream is? It can be different depending on the person. So, I mean, that makes sense for it being, in a way, a non-linear type narrative. And yeah, it's almost, this is how she imagines it.
Yeah. All right. Then we have number 4. And this is why I mentioned the car accident earlier. An accident is a terrible event. Notice the location of the accident. So obviously the opening accident is Camilla on Mulholland Drive. And as we mentioned, when we go back to the real world, so to speak, Diane is in a very similar position to Carmilla on Mulholland Drive. So I think, and other people have actually said this too, that this is supposed to indicate that that Carmilla was the terrible accident that happened to Diane. That if she hadn't met Carmilla, then things might not have gone the same way. And so that's why in her dream or her alternate reality or wherever it is, Carmilla's accident, the accident that takes away her agency and her memory and makes her helpless, takes place at the same spot that Diane was humiliated, and where her access and her agency was taken away by Carmilla, who brought her to this party to humiliate her. Okay. And kind of that was the terrible accident, at least. But yeah, I've read other theories again, because I think that with the first half, I don't necessarily think it's so much a dream as it just might be an alternate reality that Diane has kind of concocted. So I think there are a lot of clues to Diane's character in the first 2/3 of the movie that you really have to watch with the last third to try and figure out exactly what's gone wrong in her life, what kind of person she is, what's in her past. And so I think that, Carmilla having that accident there is Diane thinking that Carmilla was the person who came into her life and kind of ruined everything for her. So
I mean, yeah, because it's obviously, I mean, a little bit of a, cliche, but the fact it's on a road and you've got that whole metaphor about intersections and obviously the whole thing about your life could have gone a different way if this hadn't have happened. So they're almost doing that with them, and that's obviously a reason why they return to that scene, and you get a slightly different outcome when it's actually like Diane in the limo and not Mystery Woman / Camilla / Rita. But so that's interesting. Yeah,
no, that's an interesting thing. Like, two paths diverge in the woods, and which ones do you take? And again, that kind of goes along with the whole alternate lives and dream states, and this is who you could have been if you'd taken this choice. So I like that one. They said these clues don't necessarily help, but they definitely offer good talking points. Okay, number 5. Who gives a key and why? So we have 2 keys that are given in the film. Aunt Ruth gives the key to Betty to the apartment, and then the hitman gives the key to Betty at the end to confirm that Carmilla is dead. And we also have the key in Rita's bag, the blue key that she pulls out along with the money when she and Betty first go through her purse. So it's interesting, like, to think about, like, because keys, obviously we think of keys as being the gateway to things. Like, in books and movies, keys always symbolize like your path to a different place. You're going to unlock the door to a new thing. And so it kind of could be seen as like Aunt Betty is giving or Aunt Ruth is giving Betty the key to her dreams. Like, because we do find out in the real world that Diane was left money by her aunt. Like, when her aunt died, she inherited like her money in her apartment and stuff. So that was like the key to Hollywood, whether that's good or bad. And then of course I find it very interesting that Rita is actually carrying a blue key, because it's almost like she's carrying the key to her own destruction, because the key is what the hitman leaves for Diane after he's killed Carmilla. So I think the key one is actually one of the more interesting aspects and what it could mean.
End or near the end, with the hitman. Had he already killed Camilla at that point? I thought he was going to kill her, and that's
so the scene in Bedina. Okay, so what's interesting about so many things interesting about Mulholland Drive, but what's interesting about the third act, which is the reality segment, so the third act where we have Diane and Camilla, is that segment is actually not chronological. So you actually have to work out what goes where. So the scene in Bedina, Camilla's still alive. When she's talking to the hitman, he says, "You'll find the key here when the deed is done." But the very first scene where we ever see Diane in her reality, when the neighbor comes over to get her stuff, you see the key on the table. So that part of the segment is obviously the present, and then we go to the past to see what led up to that. She's already dead at that point. But here's an interesting theory.
True.
So this is from a website called mulhollanddrive.net. Go to this website because it is full of theories and just crazy stuff. So this person says, who gives a key? Only one key is actually given in the film. The key that Coco gives to Betty, so the landlord, because the hitman doesn't give a key, he leaves it for Diane. So there's a sleight of hand going on here. The viewers are lured into focusing on the blue key, but neither of those is ever given. Betty is given the key to Aunt Ruth's apartment. So if Coco is so if the Coco key is a clue, then Coco's relationship to the two main protagonists needs more exploring. Now, Coco in the real world,
later again, doesn't
yes,
she?
is Adam's mother, and she obviously does not approve of Camilla, and she speaks a lot to Diane. So maybe in Diane's fantasy, you know, she's now the chosen one. She's the one that everyone likes, and so Coco is like, because she's Adam's mother, it's almost like in Betty's dream, she's inviting her into that world. Just an idea. It's so confusing, this movie.
No, it makes sense. And Coco's another entertaining, larger than life character. When Betty first meets her and talks about the prize fighting kangaroo that left poop all over a courtyard. And it's like,
it probably did more than that. Like, anyone who's ever actually been around a kangaroo, okay, those fuckers are just no. Trust me, I'm an Australian. You don't want to get near one of those, and you certainly don't want it as a pet.
You would know. Yeah. And she is Ann Miller, who appeared in like Hollywood musicals. Coco.
Yes,
that's the actress, Ann Miller, like Fred Astaire music. So again, I think that's deliberate in that casting.
Another nod to old Hollywood. Yes, definitely. All right, so next we have number 6. Notice the robe, the ashtray, and the coffee cup, but he doesn't say which.
Okay.
Because so we have robes, we have Ruth's. That is left for Aunt Ruth leaves a robe for Betty that Rita later wears.
Yeah, okay.
And that one's red. Betty wears a hot pink one when she's rehearsing with Rita. And then Diane wears a shabby white one. Now, I'm not quite sure what the robes are supposed to represent. I don't really know. Now, the ashtray, I think the ashtray is supposed to indicate what I was talking about earlier, which is that the events of the third act are not in chronological order, because you'll notice that the neighbor comes to get the ashtray, and then we flash back to a scene of Camilla and Diane making out on the couch, and the ashtray is back. So I think that clue is mostly just to show, the non-linear.
So at this point, because you obviously mentioned Camilla being killed by the hitman.
Yes.
And the reason I question that is just because I never got the impression at any point that Camille was dead. I never got the
okay.
No, I guess it's just the way it plays. Like, partly just because I thought that was what that meeting in the diner was for. Then she was actually like giving him the money to kill her, sort of thing, or something like that. But I see what you mean, because then non-linear, but there's a previous scene with. Okay, I see what you mean. I mean, probably because I'm hearing these clues and we're going through them. That's probably why I never considered that. Because another thing, just talking about that body, it's quite hard to figure out who that's meant to be. Like, whether that's meant to be like Diane's body and she's the one who's dead, or if it's
so this is the body you're talking about that Betty and Rita discover when they go to Diane Selwyn's apartment?
Yeah.
And that body I always thought was supposed to be Diane, or was supposed to represent Diane having killed that part of herself. Or it could just be foreshadowing that she's going to kill herself later on.
Well, yeah, because I just thought, because obviously of the way the film ends and her suicide, you've got a blonde-haired person switching apartments now with a dark-haired person, which is almost like the role reversal, which Mystery Woman / Camilla does with Betty, as it is in the first reality. So I think, like, part of the way I read the film is then there's just this inevitability that move people into positions, into like these places, so that it's almost like it's just inevitable, and that's like that character's fate. And I think that's almost, again, I think there's a lot of meta stuff about Hollywood and just about almost just meta about like playing roles and stuff, about how I think just assuming different roles. And I think that's part of the thing with the amnesia. It's almost like, and obviously you've given me new food for thought because of these clues, but I mean, it's almost like, I think how, like, the Camilla character, or as she starts out, it's almost like you can become a different person in Hollywood. You can assume different identities. So she can name herself Rita or Rita after Rita Hayworth. And that's a way of escaping your life, and you can become someone else. So I think they're playing on that metaphor. But
no, I agree.
I think also just scenes like that, I love the mystery of it and the different questions. Like you can question, has she really lost her memory? Like, is she really manipulating the situation? Is she pretending to have amnesia? Does she just want to be a star? Does she dream of it? So that's why she takes the name. There's so many questions just to that, really.
I know.
So that's...
There's definitely a lot to say about duality and taking on different roles and taking on different personas, even just in, like I said, in the visuals of having the light-haired girl and the dark-haired girl. And then at one point in time, Rita puts on a blonde wig and then she looks kind of like Betty. And it's almost like, is Diane trying to make Camilla mold more to what she wants, or does she want them to swap roles? It's very, very interesting. And duality in doppelgangers is something that Lynch likes to, play with. So I don't think it's ever stronger than in this film, but it's definitely something to think about. And I like that idea of, the different roles that you play. And because essentially, isn't that what Hollywood is? It's people acting and pretending to be other people. So that's kind of like a meta commentary on just Hollywood in general and the fakeness of it.
Yeah, because also I think, and we can talk more about the diner scenes, but I mean also in the diner scene, just the fact that she gets the name Diane off that name badge, and it's almost like, she just gets an idea from that sort of thing. And obviously it might have been something where it did literally spur a memory. It could be something like that, or it could just be her being drawn to the name Diane. And and there's just something obviously unique about those name badges, and how obviously, and you're probably going to get to that, but how that appears twice in the movie, and how the name badges different names, but that's almost like a way to identify someone. A bit like, a photo resume sort of thing. And I mean, I sort of have theories on, the diner stuff and what have you, but we can obviously get...
Well, that is part of the clue. So in 2 clues, we're going to be able to talk about all the diner stuff, because that's definitely a scene that is brought up. But next we've got what is felt, realized, and gathered at Club Silencio. So the Club Silencio scene we talked about after Rita and Betty have fallen in love and made love, they go to sleep and then they wake up and they go to this club called Club Silencio. Now they go there in the middle of the night and they walk into, it's a very creepy theater. So what is felt, realized, and gathered there? Very eerie. So it goes in, and basically the whole show is about illusion, and how everything that's going on is an illusion. So there's a guy on stage talking about how you can hear a band, but there is no band. Oh, scary dude, isn't he?
No, Banda.
I know. And he just kind
the
of
way he phrases
crazy eyes.
Very scary.
There is no band. And so, so we have this whole guy talking about illusions and how reality isn't real. And then we get the singer, who Keith mentioned earlier, who is a collaborator with Lynch, and she comes out and sings a Spanish version of a song which is basically about unrequited love. I looked up the lyrics to the song, to the actual song. So the song is called
the song.
Crying or something. So I guess what's really felt and realized there is, and a lot of people theorize that this is obviously getting to the climax of the dream or whatever's going on here. And this is Diane realizing that her illusion is going to it's going to break eventually. She can't keep maintaining this illusion
Yeah.
where she is the savior and Rita is, the victim. And of course, what is gathered there, they get the blue box, which is the gateway back into the real world. So it really is showing that Betty has created this perfect illusion around her, and it's going to kind of come crashing down. Now, some people have theorized that this is also Betty remembering, if you go with the theory that she has suffered sexual abuse, because there are quite a few clues that she may have, that this is also her remembering kind of like that's another illusion that she's built up that's going to break. Because there's that scene where she starts to shake. They talk about, it's all an illusion, and she starts to shake, like viciously shake. And it's like, is she realizing that she's in an illusion? Is she remembering past trauma?
A memory, couldn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. So what do you make of
Definitely
Love
could read it
Silencio's
either
scene?
way.
Mm.
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely the more on the first reading. I mean, but yeah, obviously the way she shakes, and then I think having brought in the idea of sexually repressed, and I mean, definitely that old couple, you could definitely read them as being her parents or having some sort of link to her grandparents or whatever you want to say. So yeah, there definitely could definitely be an element of that. But yeah, it does feel, because I think leading up to that scene, there's been a few scenes where there's been certain shifts in Betty and certain changes in her actually not being as confident, and certain things where, because you've got the scene when she's on set and obviously they're rehearsing the actresses, and there's just a shift in the atmosphere of that scene where it cuts to her and she's suddenly just something not quite right about her. And I think the mood change in that scene and the way it cuts to her is almost maybe her questioning, do I really belong here? And I think just the tone of that scene with Adam turning around and staring at her, it almost feels like, who is this girl? Is she a fraud? Is this a facade? Does she really belong here? And there's just certain things as you go along, a few, like 2 or 3 different scenes where things start to shake up and don't. And it's sort of maybe significant that Rita, or well, I'll say Rita for now, but then she slowly becomes the more confident one, and that maybe it starts in that sex scene, for whatever reason. And if you subscribe to this idea, then it is sort of a dream, or then it's some kind of interpretation from Diane on her ideal sort of life. Then the fact that they actually go to sleep after having sort of, sex and what have you, it maybe leads into that quite nicely, because you can also question about, is the theatre real? Do they really go to it? Is it part of a dream? Because it's obviously a very dreamlike style scene.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, I mean, you make a good point about the song. Another thing about the song is, I think the reason they have us sing it in Spanish is because it's to indicate the characters not knowing what's going on. So it's almost like it's a different language to them, just like the plot of the movie, and obviously to us, the audience, because we're trying to figure out a plot. So it's almost like, logically, if this, and it might also lead credence to it being a dream, but it's just like, yeah, they're in America, and it would make sense for her normally to be singing the song. It's obviously an American song. So the fact she's singing it in a different language, I think, is meant to indicate it's a metaphor for saying this, lost in translation. They're not quite sure what's going on.
I hadn't considered that.
Yeah. And it's almost the fact it's a Spanish version of it. And as I said before, I think quite meta, because it's a real singer, and there's something ironic about that, because the whole scene is telling you this is an illusion. Hollywood is an illusion, and yet you've got actually a real life singer, rather than him just casting an actress as a singer. And yeah, I would read it more as sort of part of a dream type thing or part of a like dream type logic, and that it's more the facade is sort of slowly starting to come out, and it's more because that's again what part of what Lynch did in like Blue Velvet, where he's kind of saying, a lot of this romantic type stuff, that's the ideal reality and what people build it up to be. But in reality, this is actually the harsh reality. And that's probably something he does with the relationship. You know, again, if you're saying it's Diane's ideal, maybe in her ideal fantasy, her and Camille are together and they've got this great relationship. But in reality, maybe it doesn't quite pan out like that sort of thing.
He likes that a lot, Lynch, the ugliness behind the facade. You know, you see it in Blue Velvet, you see it in Twin Peaks, you see it in this one. It's like, you know, you always have that beautiful, shiny veneer, and then behind it is just the ugliness of humans and of whatever established. Like in this case, it's Hollywood. And I think it's very interesting the way he does that. He really likes that a lot.
Because obviously in Blue Velvet, it's almost like, Dennis Hopper, his character is so terrifying and nasty. It's almost like he is the worst of like human sort of scum type thing, and that it's the reality that these people exist and not everything is perfect, and bad stuff.
We want to pretend that it's okay, but it's really not. That's kind of what this whole movie is about. So the next clue we've already kind of discussed a little bit, which is basically just says, did talent alone help Camilla? So this is obviously about Camilla being cast over Betty in this role. And we talked a little bit about how, you know, in the dream state, we see that Adam's being forced to cast the Camilla in that universe, and there is the implication that Camilla kind of slept her way into the role, which is of course a commentary on Hollywood. Again, God, they were trying to tell us stuff about the Weinsteins years before anyone really clued in, weren't they? Like there are clues all over Hollywood, but just so a lot of that I think we've already covered in, you know, Betty versus Rita and Camilla versus Diane, in terms of like what Hollywood does and executive meddling, how actresses get roles and what they have to go through in order to maintain these. So, and again, you could also look at like Camilla in the real world, which is Rita in the real world, or Camilla in the dream sequence, which is the blonde one that Adam is forced to choose. So this is the girl. So I think it's kind of just, at least for me, I think we've already kind of covered like what that one entails. Would you think it kind of goes into anything further? I think that might just be it. What we've already talked about.
I think so,
All right, so number 9, now we can really get into a good scene. Note the occurrences surrounding the man behind Winkies. So now we can talk about the Winkies monster and that freaking scene. So earlier in the movie, in the first half of the movie, in the dream sequence, we have a scene set in a Winkies diner, which is obviously supposed to be Denny's, where two men are talking about a dream that one of the men had. And in the dream, they're in the diner, and this guy is saying, you know, we're both scared, and I know that there's a man here. There's a man behind the diner, and he wants, you know, he scares me. So we're going to call him man 1 and man 2. So man 1 had the dream, and man 2 is trying to like reassure him about the dream. And so man 2 is like, okay, so you came here today to see if it was true, didn't you? Well, let's go and see if this thing, let's go face your fear. So man 1 and man 2, this is one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. It's filmed in such a great way. The camera kind of hovers around, so it's almost like you're there with them. You're like a voyeur watching these two as they slowly go. So they slowly walk down towards the back of Winkies, and as they approach, this horrifying thing comes out from behind Winkies and scares man 1 so badly that he like dies on the spot.
Pretty much
just,
dies,
drops dead. And then we later see this creature again holding the blue box when we're back in the real world. And then we see it for a final time at the end of the film. We see it superimposed through smoke after Diane has killed herself. So note the occurrences surrounding the man behind Winkies. Now, you spoke before how there's a scene in the diner with Diane and the hitman. So it's interesting that the man's dream takes place in the same diner where Diane put the hit out on Camilla. So I think the main theory, and I'm likely to agree with this, is that the man behind Winkies, who was actually a woman, is played by a woman. Did you know that it's played by the same woman? So it's played by the same actress who plays Valak from The Conjuring 2, who plays the nun.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
cool.
So the theory is that this being is a manifestation of Diane's guilt over killing Camilla and kind of represents the darkest parts of Diane, which is why, so the man drops dead because he sees the true face of like darkness and evil and regret and everything. And then we see him with the box because the box is what sends them back into excuse me, moving my arms too much. That's what sends them back into the real world. And then right at the end, after Diane has killed herself, it shows up again. And if you watch carefully, it actually fades into a shot of Betty looking really happy. So the theory is that it is a manifestation of everything. And it's supposed to be the darkest part of Diane. So what do you reckon?
Yeah, well, I think I have to go with that because I, these clues and thinking about them, I guess they're quite new to me, and it's sort of not the way I was thinking of the movie. I mean, I'd seen the clues before, but I think I have to go with that because I mean, obviously I assumed it was some sort of like dark manifestation, and I noticed obviously he talks about the dream and it's not day or night, it's sort of like half light, and that's that's a crucial detail, and again that's sort of like blurring the line, but they're sort of describing in some ways what we see later in the film. I'll go with that because I mean some of the feelings I was having about like the diner scenes and like in general and just some of this stuff was just I think again it was Lynch playing with this sort of wholesome slice of America where it's these sort of places are like just like seen as like traditionally working class and quite sort of welcoming and friendly, and so in a way the fact that there's this darkness lurking behind it and waiting round the back, and it's almost like again it's a false reality, it's a false picturesque, because I think also the fact that they use a chain almost saying this is like a commercial chain type, and they obviously they substitute, because they probably couldn't use the real chain, so they just come up with Winkies. But the idea is then it's a brand rather than it's just like a typical mum and pop type, diner. So it's a brand. So it's almost like they're saying the sort of shallowness, sort of superficial brandness of it and prestigeness. It's like false sort of friendly almost type thing, and it's hiding something darker. But no, that is really cool actually. I did, because that was one I was struggling to work out what that could be about. So that does sound like a sound sort of theory. Then it could well have something to do with that, because it's very sort of scary as well.
Oh, I love the Winky
scene. The way it's shot.
Crap out of me the first time I watched it. Like, was not now this is how you do an effective jump scare. See, go to David Lynch. He knows how to do jump scares, because that scene, there's so much build up and there's so much tension, and then when you finally see the creature, you're not expecting that at all. I think they said it took something like 12 hours to get her into that makeup to make her look that scary, and it's such an effective. I mean, when you talk about Mulholland Drive, they will almost always mention the Winky scene because it's such an iconic scene in the movie. Just comes out of nowhere and is just such an impact. So great scene, but I like interpretation.
Yeah, no, me too. And I think a lot of times they almost say like Lynch is the best director of horror to never direct horror.
100%.
It's sort of one of those things where obviously because he's a unique genre of his own, he doesn't really need to do a horror movie, but it's just sort of funny how he is so good at directing horror, and there's a lot of horror in his films. So
Yes,
yeah, that's
yes.
a standout scene.
The 10th and final clue, and this one is interesting because this one leads to a whole slew of theories that I never even thought about. The final clue is, where is Aunt Ruth? So Aunt Ruth is obviously Betty's aunt and also Diane's aunt, and that's basically just the question, where is she? So this has actually spawned the theory that leads into Diane having been sexually abused as a child, that somehow Aunt Ruth knew about this, and that's why she's inherited this thing. And some people think, okay, so at Club Silencio, there's a lady sitting in a box just off to the side of the stage with blue hair. People have theorized that that is Aunt Ruth breaking into Betty's reality and like an ominous figure there, especially because she pops up right at the end of the movie to say Silencio, and then the movie ends. So this one is one I haven't actually thought about that much, because Aunt Ruth is not obviously a prevalent character, but it does open up a lot of possibilities as to who Diane was, what her childhood was like, who these people are to her. So that's one that I actually have to read into, I think, a bit more before I can give like my own theory. But it's interesting that a character who's never really seen properly and doesn't really pay much attention, like you don't really pay much attention to Aunt Ruth, is apparently one of the biggest clues to the movie. So I read like a whole essay last night about Diane being sexually abused and stuff like that. I mean, it's interesting, but I think this is one that maybe Lynch just threw in to fuck with us, because he's just like, let's just have a little bit of fun. I don't know. Like, it's really interesting. She's not a character
Possibly.
I really about.
I mean, obviously, I've wondered who the blue-haired woman is meant to be, and it is sort of possible. It's possible because obviously Aunt Ruth, for good or for bad, has a big role in Diane's life. She is very prominent, and it's almost like she's taking this position at the end of this big sort of mystery that's unraveled, and part of the whole this is an illusion type thing, and she's right there in the location where that's obviously been laid out. And because it's sort of funny the way, I guess, once again, if you read it as this is Diane's dream or Diane's ideal type thing, how maybe Aunt Ruth is a bit more, their relationship is more healthy, and she's letting us stay in the apartment. And it's obviously one of these funny things where, it's sort of idealized how she's staying in her apartment. She's living the Hollywood dream, and there's nothing but good things in a way being said. And it's sort of funny how Aunt Ruth has these small little scenes, like she has that, and it's after they've swapped places in the middle where she actually walks into the room and there's no one there, and she's just nods sort of, and that's it.
Oh, good. I've just read something here that I never really thought of. Someone's saying, is her name a pun? Aunt Ruth could also be pronounced as untruth, as in this is not like true. That's interesting. And then I think someone else has pointed out that the name, that the word Ruth means like grief or regret or something. So again, that could like her.
Be.
It could be
something I've heard, but it could be, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like I said, I definitely would recommend going to this site, this mulhollanddrive.net. It's just full of like theories and all of this really cool stuff, because I think at the end of the day with this film is it's one of those films that everyone's going to have their own interpretation, and I don't think that any interpretation could be seen as like wrong. Like I think it's one of those films that's so open to so many different ways to view it, but I think maybe that's the point. Like, you're supposed to apply to this film your own personal experiences, what you believe, your own beliefs, your own truth, and kind of find them in this film. So I think at the end of the day, my inclination with this film is to believe that the first half is just an idealized version of what Diane wishes for her life. It might be a dream. It might be a fantasy she's had. Maybe she took too many drugs and she went on a nice trip. But either way, that first 2/3 is Diane's ideal life. And I think that if you keep the the last third of the movie in mind and Diane as a character, and you watch that knowing that she's the real character, that the first 2/3 of the film actually have a lot of clues about her characterization, what her wishes are, what her hopes are, what her insecurities are, because you can kind of see that play out. Like, it is very, very interesting that in the fantasy sequence, Rita has almost no power. You know, she's amnesiac. She doesn't have any family. She doesn't have any friends. She only has Betty. And it's interesting that Diane has created a version of Camilla that is completely dependent on her. Like, it really shows the depth of her obsession with Camilla and her codependency. And it's interesting that that's the character that she creates. You look like that you're wanting to say something.
Well, no, because that's just the point. It is from Diane's perspective. So I think there is a reading on the end of the film where you could say that maybe Camilla and Adam aren't being as superficial and shitty as they come across. Then maybe it's just. I mean, obviously, maybe Diane's been left a bit by the wayside, and there's that, but. Obviously, there's sort of small signs that Camilla still sees her as a friend and still wants her as a friend. And so she hasn't totally, like, just because she's got a big break and she's in this relationship, she hasn't totally shoved her to the side. Like, she's still inviting her to stuff. And it's sort of hard to read, isn't it? Because there is a little bit of, she's made it now. She's with Adam. She's being superficial. And because obviously that scene when they're filming the love scene, I mean, that could be seen as them just rubbing it in her face. Because
definitely.
Obviously, Camille's like, can Diane stay? So it's almost like stay to see that sort of thing. And it's like Adam is almost getting a kick out of showing this other actor how to, like, film or act the perfect love scene. And that's obviously quite meta because they're in a relationship. But so I think you can read that two ways. You could read it as they're being superficial and they're almost like rubbing it in her face. But I mean, in some ways, because when they're kind of having a sex scene, but then Camilla pulls away from it and says we shouldn't do this anymore. It's almost like in that scene she's not totally like shitty to Diane. She's just trying to say, no, we talked about this, don't be like this sort of thing. So it's, I think, there's sort of two readings of it, but it's sort of interesting. And maybe a lot of this could just be, I mean, partly the way Diane sees it, because in that second half of the film, like that scene on the set, it's notably from her point of view and the way she's seeing it. And the same at the party when they announced the engagement. So it's almost like, in some ways, that could be Diane maybe hearing or seeing things that aren't there, or maybe just interpreting them as like them rubbing the salt in, rather than it's just actually they're engaged, they're happy, and because she obviously invites Diane. So no, there is two ways to read that stuff, I think, which is interesting.
So at the end of the day, how do you see the film? Do you see it as a dream sequence and then reality, or just like an idealized fantasy?
Maybe more idealized, just because dreams themselves don't exactly work like that. There's a different sort of logic to dreams. And this, again, is part of the beauty, because it's almost like there is a basic answer to the main riddle, but then how you work out the rest of the details and exactly what's going on, it's almost that stuff's up to you. And I think that's what Lynch wants. I think that's why he gives away very few ideas and clues. That's why in his interviews he's quite cryptic. He doesn't give away much about his films. So there's something nice about that. Then he actually wants you to have your own take on it, your own sort of reading. So I would go more with idealized, because
me too.
That actually fits with the theme of the film, the fact that she's an inspiring actress, and it's almost like this is how I see my career going, my career in life, or how I want it to sort of go. Way to do it actually, because it sort of opened me up to new ideas about the film. Because certainly the sexual abuse one, and maybe that old couple being like related to her somehow. But, I mean, obviously that makes a lot of sense because they do seem, obviously when they come in on the plane, they seem awfully trummy, and it's almost that sort of relationship. And obviously it might be that they've just got chatting on the plane and stuff, but obviously you get the impression there's more to it, especially when they're in the car and they're sort of laughing.
And they're just smiling and laughing. And it's like, no, stop that. Yeah, Stephen and I were watching this. We were like, please stop. We don't like this at all. And they're just kind of like, yeah, it's a little creepy. So what would you... No, sorry, you go.
Oh, no, it's all right. I mean, I was just going to bring up, because, I mean, the only sort of is the cowboy scene, which is brilliant.
The cowboy
scene. Love the cowboy scene. And I don't know how that works out, but he goes to see him on a ranch, which is so perfect.
I know, it's brilliant.
And again, this is just an example of an oddball Lynch character that he just throws in, and the actor's great. I'm not sure if I've seen him in anything else, but the actor's great, and it's just almost, again, just like this whole thing of Hollywood putting up a facade, Hollywood putting almost like these characters who are just like the front of it, and you've got like the big guns, the big executives hiding behind them, and they just send them to do their sort of bidding or send a message. And it's obviously this really trippy scene, and the back and forth is really funny in here, where it's like, he even says howdy, and he's like,
howdy.
What's on your mind? It's like, oh, pretty eager to get to it, are you? This guy who says what he means, and there's just this sort of tension between them, where Adam just wants to move the conversation along because he's just so weirded out, and I just love when the exchange where he sort of says, I believe, does he say, I believe often a man's attitude determines how his life will be? His
passing life. Yeah.
And he just says, is that something you agree with? And he's like, sure. And again, he's trying to move the conversation on. So it's just like, are you saying that because you know, to agree with me, or is that what you truly believe?
Yeah, and he's like, no, I believe what you said.
And then he tests him, doesn't he? Because
because I was like, I believe what you said, and he's like, well, what did I say? And he's like, that a man's attitude determines his life. And he's like, all right. You know, something funny, a little tidbit about that. So they wanted the cowboy to look like really bizarre and kind of like not otherworldly. So they shaved his eyebrows. He has no eyebrows. And that's deliberately to make you feel kind of like there's something not right about this guy. I think it is a great commentary, like you were saying, about like the mechanisms of Hollywood and the idea that there are these big, you know, unforeseen forces behind the scenes that have like these people to come out and keep the machinery working and kind of do their bidding. And like you said, it leads into that meta commentary on Hollywood and how everything kind of works that way. It's a very fun
because another question about it, I don't know if you're meant to feel too much about it, but it just he has obviously that great line we've said about you know, if you do good, you'll see me. Is it one more time? And
one more
time. Bad, see. I don't know how that quite works out. What the two more times would be if
I'm not sure, but you do actually see him two more times after that scene. So yeah, I mean, what we see him from Diane's perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, so it could just be a whole thing where, because obviously Adam actually does what he wants.
Yes, I was going to say.
But then maybe Adam only saw him once, but it could be meta again. He could be talking to the audience, and it might be because we see him two more times almost. I don't know if that means we did bad or something like that.
No.
But that's because I was then trying to think how many more times we saw him. We obviously saw him. He wakes the girl up. He says,
yes, he wakes her up, and then you see him at the party scene.
At the party,
but he's only in the background. You just kind of see him walk behind, and like that's it. But we do actually see him two more times. So I guess we did bad. So, or maybe because it's Diane's fantasy. It's like she Stop that, you two. Sorry,
Oh,
cats.
so.
She did that, because she had Camilla killed. So
Yeah,
maybe
you
she's
could
thinking
read it
twice because she does bad. She ends up killing her lover.
because yeah, because I sort of knew what he meant by that. I knew then, obviously, but I didn't know exactly what the two more times would be and why two more times, and
Because you also have to remember that when he tells Adam, he says, "You will say this is the girl." Like those are the exact words that Adam has to say
right.
when he sees her. When Diane is giving the hitman Camilla's photo, she says, "This is the girl." So maybe it
Okay.
really is a reference to Diane doing bad.
Yeah.
That's why Diane sees
Oh,
it
okay.
twice. I actually hadn't really thought about that until we started to talk about it. See, this is the thing with this movie. I mean, if we wanted to, we won't, guys. But if we wanted to, we could probably do like a 5-hour discussion on this movie. It's just
Probably,
so
yeah.
crazy. But it's such a great film. Like,
But it's a
even
great,
with
yeah.
all of its mind screwiness, it's so atmospheric and it's so well cast. And like I said, Lynch's direction is brilliant. The way he frames some of these scenes, the music, just everything. And then, of course, you have the mystery at the heart of it. So I think anyone who watches this film the first time comes away very frustrated because you just don't
Yeah.
know what happened. Like I've told you, but like the first time I made my husband watch this film, he yelled at me for like an hour afterwards because he was so
Yeah.
frustrated with the film. And I was like, yeah, we all go through this. This is the stages of being a David Lynch fan. It's like the 5 stages of grief. First you've got anger, then frustration, then you come to acceptance. You just start kind of get used to it. But it's just, I really do think this is one of Lynch's better films. It's just so good and leaves such an impact on you. Even if you come
Yeah.
away so confused, you will think about the film for days afterwards. It just sticks in your
Well, you
mind.
do. Yeah, you do have that reactions because, when I finally got it to see it at the cinema, which was a few years ago or whatever, it's like the people in the cinema and a few people in front of me where like the two guys had seen it before and the girl hadn't. So one of the guys just turned to the girls at the end, like, sorry for putting you through that sort of thing. But it's sort of that thing, and yeah, it takes a few sort of watches to really digest it and get into it.
Definitely.
And I think what's perfect is the fact that we've actually done a non-linear review, whereas
We have, haven't we?
normally we do pretty linear reviews, don't we? So it's fitting for a Lynch movie, and for this, then we actually did it non-linear. That is perfect. But
Yeah.
no, it was a lot of fun actually going through the clues with you, and I think that opened me up to new things. And because I probably had been looking at it from a different point of view, and if you have these ideas, it definitely makes you reinvalidate scenes which you had probably read in a different way before,
Definitely.
or you were just broaching them in a different way. But I think it's a masterpiece. I think it's one of his best films. Obviously, so much about film is it's about you, it's about what you bring to it, what you get from it. And so I'll just say Lynch is my favorite director, so of course this is one of his best films. So from that point of view, it's one of my favorite films. Same as you, and I have rewatched it a lot. But I think what's telling is the fact that 20 years on, people are still having these conversations. I mean, that's a great sign of a really great film, and how we've just had fresh takes on it and stuff. I think that's a really good sign of a film that has aged so well and just so unforgettable. 3 great lead performances. There's so many standout type scenes. I also enjoyed the scene where she goes to the rehearsal and in a really cringeworthy scene in some ways because of that old guy. And maybe that could be, like you said before, a comment on Weinstein era, and certainly the way he's acting in that scene is quite creepy. But that scene again is working on multiple levels, where it's kind of like, how in control is she? How innocent is she? How much of this is a performance? and how much of it is more than she's just wide-eyed and she's like naive, and it's just a really funny scene. It's another quite entertaining scene because it's almost like taking the piss out of those bad daytime soap type things and just really hammy. And I think it's a real skill of Naomi Watts, and in certain scenes she actually knows how to be a bad actress, and obviously in reality she's a great actress. So that's why the performance is so good, because she has to juggle all these different things. But I think when you know how to act, it's actually a skill to then act bad, sort of thing.
Badly,
in certain scenes like that. So that's another standout scene, and that's pretty hilarious. So I think it's a perfect film. I think it's a unique film. So 10 out of 10, definitely from me.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add to that. Like I said earlier, this is one of my favorite films. It is one of those films that is actually very personal to me because it made such an impact on me at the time that I saw it. And like I said, it kind of made me fall in love with filmmaking and what you can do with film and what you can portray and the messages that you can send. It was really the first experimental film that I really saw, and it just stayed with me for so long after. And every time I rewatch it, I find myself finding something new, something I didn't see before, a scene that I maybe read differently, something in the background, some line will slip through and I'll be like, oh, okay. I love every time you watch this film, it's like solving a mystery all over again, and you just get more and more layers. The performances are great. I think Naomi Watts in particular, like you said, she is so good, and she does so well playing the dual roles of Diane and Betty. And I think I noticed this time around, when she plays Betty, she plays her with a very exaggerated sense of everything is heightened and it's oh, we're going to go solve a mystery and this is so exciting. And she likes to say it'll be just like in the movies, and I think that really amps up this idealized version of Hollywood. The wide-eyed starlet coming to Hollywood for the first time and hoping all her dreams will be realized. And then when she plays Diane in a very down-to-earth, bitter, kind of grounded way to show the real personality and how the real personality is so broken beneath the the facade.
There's some really grueling scenes, like when she's just masturbating, really, and it's really tragic just to see how intense she is in that scene.
She gets it. A lot of the stuff that she has to do with Diane is very intense, and I think that her facial expressions alone, just the dinner scene where you can see her, the tension that she's holding as Camilla and Adam kind of humiliate her. And then, of course, that final scene where she kills herself and she's just screaming blue murder, but you really get the sense of how her sanity has slipped to the point that, she's seeing these hallucinations. So, Naomi Watts is great. I think Laura Herring, who plays Rita and Camilla, is good, but, her character doesn't demand as much as Betty's and Diane does, Because, as Rita, she's kind of just a blank slate. She's kind of just there to look wide-eyed and stuff. She gets a little bit more to do with Camilla, but again, we're seeing things from Diane's perspective, so we're definitely more with Diane than we are with Camilla.
Because it must be, I mean, probably for both actresses, it's quite fun and they get to play two versions. But that's probably fair to say then it's more through Diane's perspective. So maybe and just the extremes are a bit further apart.
They're much And I actually think that Justin Theroux is really good in this. Some of the deadpan. He has some great deadpan scenes where, just the reactions he has to some of the executives, the meeting he has with the cowboy, of course, the scene that we talked about where he comes home and finds his wife cheating on him. It's like he's the only sane man in this crazy cast of nutty characters. He's just kind of walking around how did I end up here? He doesn't quite.
Because I think he does represent the everyman in some ways, and how because the whole thing he goes through, as funny as some of it is, but with the paint on him when he leaves, and obviously he's been kicked out of his place, and the whole gene thing, and it's almost this just represents the everyman who's just been trodden on by Hollywood, and it's
so I think he's
very
good.
And I think another.
No, you go.
Well, no, I'm just going to go back to Laura Heron because it's
Mm.
also funny. I'm assuming it was before this. She was on Sunset Beach, so
Oh, okay.
like the soap Sunset Beach, which is like really terrible. I remember watching it in the afternoons when I was younger, but I don't know if that was deliberate. I mean, it might have been accidental. Lynch might not even have known, but I just wonder if he picked an actress from a cheesy style soap, and it's almost like, yeah, we're good. He might not even have known, to be fair. I mean, but I know he does have an interest in soap operas because of like Twin Peaks and what have you.
Oh,
But
yeah. Well,
yeah,
I mean, maybe. I mean, Naomi Watts was in her own bad soap. Like almost every Aussie actor or actress, she was on Home and Away. So
okay,
which
I
is
didn't
a
know
really,
that, but
yeah, oh
it
yeah,
doesn't surprise me.
yeah.
You
Yeah,
know.
it's kind of a rite of passage in Australia. If you're an Australian actor, you will either be at some point on Home and Away or Neighbours.
Or
And so
Neighbours, yeah.
Naomi Watts was in Home and
Because I
Away. So
know,
yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
Russell Crowe, Guy
Mm,
Pearce,
Guy Pearce. I think
yeah,
Nicole
so
Kidman,
many
probably the
people.
only one who wasn't. He was
Yeah,
never on either. Chris Hemsworth was on Home and Away, all of that. So yeah, it's like I said,
yeah,
if you're an Australian actor, you've been on one of those shows probably. But that's interesting that
yeah,
Harren was
and
in the soap as well.
yeah, and that's just funny how most of those actors that they're good actors, and it's just funny how it becomes this thing where, hey, if they actually show up in those soaps, it probably means they're gonna have a pretty good career. So
Yeah. Well,
that's
like
pretty
Margot Robbie
no,
too was in
pretty-
Neighbours, so yeah,
yeah,
they all kind of
yeah,
start there.
that's
But
pretty funny.
this film is fantastic. I'm with you. I'd give it 10 out of 10. I just think it's so
Yeah,
great. It's so thought provoking. It's made so well. And it, like I said, it's one of those films that just stays with you. Like I said, I watched it last night. I woke up this morning thinking about it. I thought about it all last night. I was on the internet
yeah.
reading all the trivia and everything. It just gets in my head. And so this will now stay with me for like the next few days. Just a great film, guys. So if you haven't seen it, do go and see it. You will be very confused, but it will be worth it. I promise. You'll be angry at first. Everyone is, but then you'll get over it.
Yeah. I think there's this thing with Lynch, isn't it, where you just go through cycles of coming back to his work and just
Yeah.
spending a certain amount of time with it. And, obviously there was another cycle a few years ago when Twin Peaks came back and stuff like that. And you just spend a certain period where you just, in a way, look at his work again, and just everything is like Lynchian and just different
Mm-hmm.
things, and then you sort of take a break because you have to, but then there'll be another cycle where you again go back. And and it's definitely, because it obviously sounds like we should do more Lynch movies, definitely,
I think so.
reviews,
Because, and here's something I
because
have to admit,
some
which
you
you're not going to
haven't
find
seen.
too impressive. No, I have not seen all of Twin Peaks. I've only ever seen a couple of episodes. So that would be interesting if we did a Twin Peaks watch, because you've seen it and I
Oh,
haven't.
we'll
So we could kind
definitely
of go
do
through
that.
it and see how we go. So, yes, I think
Yeah,
we'll
I mean,
definitely.
I mentioned I think they're doing a new season next year,
Okay.
but well, they're doing something, and it could be Twin Peaks related. I'll say that. I don't think
Okay.
it's clear what they're doing, but it seems to have some sort of potential tie-in. So
All right.
obviously, we might have to have a catch up before then. I don't know,
Yes.
but he's doing it with Netflix, so that's good news.
Okay. Cool. Well, we'll see. It's
But
definitely, but yes, definitely. We'll have to explore some more Lynch. Maybe not Blue Velvet. That film traumatizes me, but we'll see
okay.
how we go.
We can leave that. I mean, I think Lost Highway might be interesting because
Yes.
that again explores doppelgangers, but in a
Mm-hmm.
different way. And
Yes.
yeah, obviously, I don't think of it as highly as this, but I mean, I
No.
think that might be a good one to do. And
Is that one Patricia Arquette? Is that
yeah,
yes? Yes, I
Bill
remember Lost Highway.
Pillman. I
Yes,
mean,
that,
it probably is a lesser Lynch, but there's still a lot to
there's still a lot
enjoy
to
in it.
unpack.
It's
Mm-hmm.
still, even a lesser Lynch, there's still a lot of great stuff. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Okay, we'll definitely do
No.
more Lynch. And with us going into TV, and probably it, a Twin Peaks watch might be a good idea
Yes,
to go
I would
through
agree.
that whole show because, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll see. But that's obviously Mulholland Drive, 20 years old now. I think probably this month or something, but around about the anniversary, and pretty in-depth review that certainly went places. But I hope you enjoyed it and our review, and obviously let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always. Share us out on social media. Obviously, you can get other content, film reviews. I think we're approaching the sort of snowy month, the month of Christmas. So that means one way or the other, whether it's the two of us or just me, but there will be some Christmas style reviews coming up on the channel. Some maybe commentaries, because I've recently started Patreon on the channel, which I'll plug and just say patreon.com/board now if you want to support the channel, and just you can pay as little as $1. That's the least amount. So if you just want to add a little financial support to the channel, you can do that at the Patreon link, which I'll also put in the description. But one thing I've done up there, actually, because I'm sort of doing movie commentaries there, but my first movie commentary, which I recorded this week, was Raiders of the Lost Ark, the first Indiana Jones, which I absolutely love. And I had a fun time rewatching that and doing the commentary. So that commentary is up there now. And I may well do the other Indiana Jones movies. The original three, I'm not sure if I want to watch Crystal Skull again, because that was pretty dire. But the original three I might do, but yeah, Raiders of the Lost Ark, I've done a commentary of that, and I might do some.
Dude's face melts off.
Yeah, at the end. Yeah,
I haven't seen
pretty wild stuff.
Yeah, I know that thing. I've only seen Temple of Doom, which I saw when I was like 5, and it traumatized the crap out of me. So no Indiana Jones here.
Darker, aren't they, than you would expect for that sort of thing? But yeah,
it was the whole dude who was like tearing people's hearts out and then like throwing them in the furnace. Like, what the hell was that? But I am going to interrupt briefly to say, because I wanted to say this at the beginning, but I didn't get a chance. Congratulations on reaching 500 subscribers.
Okay.
That is awesome. Awesome milestone. So yes, more people follow.
Yeah, recently passed
that's very cool.
That's why I started the Patreon thing. But yeah. So that commentary's there, and I might also do Christmas film commentaries. In fact, I'm probably going to do It's a Wonderful Life. I probably record that commentary in the next couple of days and put it up. So it's sort of up to you how much you pledge, really. There's no set amount that you have to pledge. If you only pledge $1, that will still give you access to stuff like that. So just support the channel that way if you can. And Rachel, if you want to promote your channel before we go.
Yeah, guys, come follow me, Rachel McDonald, video essays on TV shows and movies. I haven't been as active this year as I normally am. I'm hoping to change that next year, but I'm dealing with some injuries at the moment and some personal stuff, so we'll see what happens. But come follow me. You never know. So yeah, Rachel McDonald. You can find my Tumblr and my Twitter there as well. And I will still be on Keith's channel a bit because we've still got some more reviews coming up. So follow me everywhere and follow Keith.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, it's a collaboration, definitely. But thanks, guys, and take care. Let us know your thoughts on Mulholland Drive and Silencio.